Thank you so much for coming, Paul.
Of course, George.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Paul Starrett, and I have a law firm specializes in AI governance. And we also have a company called Privacy Labs that is a marketplace. We don't like the term. We approach providers like yourself and invite you to join the marketplace for free. And then we have financial services, highly regulated entities come to us. We can help them find solutions for their path to compliance nirvana.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you're kind of in a similar space where we are, the intersection between compliance and AI.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's why I was here.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful platform.
Thank you. And especially kind of what piqued my interest was, you said the law firm.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you see AI making its way into the legal profession? And what are the implications? Because security, let's be honest, security and legal, we work really close together. Right. Yeah. So we talk a lot about the engineering. I would like to hear your point kind of from a legal perspective. How do you think the AI will affect how security and legal interact with each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way that I would approach that is with what I've heard to refer to as legal analytics, or the practice of law and security in AI. So law firms are using AI to for electronic discovery, or with contract management, or tracking client and associate activity to find out how they're doing. So in law practice management, that's one place, which includes securing the law firm's cloud environments, their smart devices. But there's also a practice area, and let me know if I'm going off the rails of your questions here, but there's legal liability when it comes to AI systems that are not properly secured, or don't do what they say they're going to do, or that bias data and outputs, or that there is a contract breach when a third party is hired to build a model or something like that. Are they being compliant with the contractual terms? So
right.
There's the application of law to the development and use of AI. And so and did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Actually, that resonates very well based on my experience with AI, with the legal department. Usually, kind of most of my kind of interaction was they're reviewing a contract, either with a vendor or with a customer, and we made certain representations in that contract, and they come to the security and say, "We promise we're going to do that. Can we actually do it? Are we doing it?"
Right. Due diligence.
Yeah, the due diligence type of thing. Due diligence. Actually, I'm glad that you're bringing due diligence, because it's a bigger thing. And kind of when, for example, when you do acquisition of the divestiture, also the security comes in and, okay, those guys claim that they have this. Do they actually have it?
Right.
Does it work as you expect from a security perspective?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And one of the challenges on my side is that nobody knows the entire environment. Right? There is no single person in the company that knows everything.
True.
Right?
Yep.
And usually when the legal counsel comes to me and say, "We promised this customer that we're going to do X. Are we doing it?" And my answer in 99% of the cases, "Let me get back to you." Right?
Yep.
And I go and find out someone who knows this thing. They can do the research. They can come back to me. I can package it in a way that I can present it to the legal counsel internally. Right. And as you know, one of the frictions in every organization is the contract review.
Yeah.
So in a way, my function is contributing to that friction in the contract. So that's one thing. I think AI can be used to answer those questions, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
So let me flip it back and I say, imagine I give you a chat GPT for security and compliance within the organization. And when you ask me the question, "Are we doing X?" I say, "Ask this guy, he'll tell you."
So you're using generative AI to help you answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a generative AI that has the context of everything that we do within the organization from a security perspective. Talk to the agent. They know what we're doing, so they'll give you the answer.
That's so smart. And the reason I would say that is because you can prove by the way that agent works that the answer you gave was correct. Exactly. Because it's automated. You don't have to worry about human, I went home for lunch or something and I forgot something.
Yeah.
It's doing it automated, but also you can spend that money on something else. So the time you would spend, you can now not have to do that and go off and do something else.
Yeah.
And put that back towards your security budget or your time or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, and it will make the interaction between the legal and security team much smoother from that perspective.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the other kind of the flip side of the due diligence is the regulator comes to the legal department and say, prove me that you're doing X, Y, or Z, or tell me how you're
Right.
we go through the same circle again.
Yes.
Go to the security,
Yes.
ask them, eventually they'll come back with the answer.
I think in my experience, I think that's probably the case where you'll find that happening more often than the council.
Right.
This is because the council, and you know this, I'm just saying it, is that the council is going to be looking at it from the risk perspective generally of the company. Why are we spending so much money on something? They're looking at it as a necessary evil. The regulator, they already have a budget. They don't care. They're coming and saying, look, either you're compliant or you're not. Tax dollars are paying my salary. Tell me what's going on. I would think there's a stronger impetus or a stronger incentive to use a tool like that. Push a button, have it come back, give you a report on what's going on. There you go.
Yeah. And of course, we're not advocating for completely removing the human in the chain at this point.
Yes.
Because this is more of an assistant. Give me the answer, references to why I came up with that answer, so we can check and say, yep, that's good. Maybe we need to massage it so that it answers the question from the regulator or how we put it in the contract. Yeah, of course, but at least shaves off 60-70% of the work necessary.
And I think it also reflects very well on the company for having that.
Yeah.
Because what they're thinking is, so a lot of companies will have just a security policy or something and they do nothing with it. See, where is it? Here it is. What are you doing? Well, I don't know. Right?
I have the document.
That's the wrong answer. So what you want to say, well, we even have an automated system to help us with this. You're going to go, oh, you are answering the question. And they're more worried about, are you trying? If, they are going to really relax, at least in the United States. The regulators are much more friendly and positive and constructive. If you say, look, we're trying, you go, okay, that's what we're most worried about. If you're not, that's when they come at you hard. So if you show them that you're using AI to help you, that they say, yeah, at least they're on top of it. So you get that credit with the regulator.
That's an interesting angle. So it's not just to be compliant, but also to show that you're spending effort
exactly
to solve the problem, to address the risk.
They want to see good attitude. And I think that's why they're there. They're not there to come in and beat you over the head. They're just going to say, look, you have the policy, you're making the effort, right? You're using a tool with AI. It's great. Makes it easier for you.
It's not perfect,
but that's the whole thing, right? Yes. It's not perfect. Well, you missed that little checkbox down in the corner there. That's a $10,000 fine.
More like a getcha type of attitude.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I think
that's helpful. Okay. So I guess we can use the AI for that, but what are the limitations? So let's push the limit. We're talking about, so far we've been talking about the AI assistant. There's a lot of talk about the agentic AI, where the AI actually does the work.
Yes.
So how far can we push it? Like, where do you think are the boundaries and why the boundaries are there?
The first thing in any type of compliance, because I'm looking for legal liability, like product liability or contract breach, but then there's compliance and regulation. So from any of those perspectives, you first have to know what it's doing and what it's supposed to do. Because if it doesn't, how do you know it's screwing up? Right? So the first thing you have to do is make sure you know it's doing what it's supposed to. When you start out, always start out simple. It should be explainable. Yeah. So if you try to get too cute or clever, it's going to be a black box and it's going to go off and do things you don't know anything about. And I think right now, the challenge is when you have a lot of crosstalk between agents, that's where you go off the rails a bit. So I think people are kind of focusing on agents that have their own lane, and then they come back and share information there. But when you have that sort of permutations, who knows where it's going to go unless you've tested the permutations.
Right.
You have a test bench, for example, that says, all right, well, go off and do this and come back with your answer and look for it.
And give me reference why you came up with that answer.
Exactly. And what did you screw up anything else along the way? So you want to kind of say, well, what do we not want it to do? And start there and then work back to what you want it to do. And then as long as you understand what's going on, you keep it simple, anything should work.
Right.
Because, agentic is not new. You have threading, right? You have threads. You have,
we have the bots.
With the bots.
Yeah.
But yet there are other things where we have callback functions in software where you have a lot of things going off and doing things. Agentic is really no different. The difference is it's AI. It's doing more than just getting a file or checking permissions or something.
Right.
It's doing something. well, I found this, this, and this. That means I should probably do that down there. So the agent then becomes sort of a thinking thing. As long as you test the thought process and you first say, don't do this, and work back, then at least, if it screws up, it's not going to go past these rails.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Where do you see in your particular space, where do you see examples, like specific examples of, yeah, this is a good implementation, or Jesus, how they came up with this thing?
Wow. Well, to be honest, I probably would be at a loss to come up with specifics for things I've come across because I can't really talk about them. I would have to say, look, I think a large majority of companies are not leaning into AI governance. I think that there's a rush to be competitive because now AI has become the new commercial enabling.
Oh yeah, you put .ai in your name and the valuation goes twice.
Exactly.
Right.
Or you're doing something with AI to be better than your competitor. So now I can process a loan 3 times faster, or I can spot a threat on your network 4 times faster. So the company's not doing that, they're not going to be around.
Right.
They're all using AI. So there's a rush to get to that. In the process, they wind up running roughshod over things they should pay attention to that become landmines later.
So how would you approach, I'm glad that you're bringing the governance problem, because to your point, very often when we deploy new technology, it's a rush. And then we start thinking about the governance, the risk, the compliance afterwards, right? How should we approach the AI governance?
Well, that's a great question. I think the way that I usually approach it is if I'm asked to come in and do like a legal assessment. So big question, as you probably know, is you're exposed to governance generally. So you know the behemoth problem that it is you have to, there's a thing called an AI bomb, a bill of materials. You know the software bill of materials?
Yep.
AI bomb.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know this. Oh, great. Yep. So what that is essentially is like, here is our entire AI ecosystem, right?
Right.
This is where the data is coming from. Here's the tools we're using to build the
train
models,
it, what we use it for,
exactly, and the testing stuff and stuff like that.
Yep.
And so what you want to do is, first of all, what domain are they? Is it a typically highly regulated thing like financial services, healthcare, government, pharma? Is that tells you, look, the laws, regulations are going to be all over you. HIPAA, Family, Wiley, what have you.
AML, all of those.
Exactly, right. And PCI, DSS, whatever. And then you start there and you say, all right, where are your landmines? You have contractual agreements. You want to look at the contracts.
So essentially do a risk assessment.
Exactly. Look at what's there. And it's such a big question. And I apologize. I started with the AI bomb because you could at least say, this is my checklist to look for what you could or should have. And then I can say, well, okay, we've gone through the big checklist to say, all right, here's what you have, don't have, or what you're using or not using. Then I can start with that. Say, I know what resources I have. I know what players I have, who's responsible, stakeholders, KPIs, whatever.
Yeah.
What are the laws that apply to you? Have you hired third parties? If so, who are they? How are you controlling them? Because that's probably the biggest single risk in AI right now.
Yep.
And so that's a high level. So let's just go to the 3 letters: governance, risk, and compliance. Governance is internal, right?
Yeah.
It's like policies, procedures, internal assessments,
Decision making.
Exactly. And the controls you have.
Yeah.
Right? Risk is what's going to cost me, what's the risk, what's going to cost, what's the risk. And the compliance is the law. It's external factors. So you look at all those things, you bring them together in this little pool, and then say, and that's about as far as you can say. Beyond that is just, it's very contextual and bespoke.
Yeah.
It's my theory.
So what I saw in my previous life, specifically around the governance, and it applies to AI governance, is you start, as you said, with the risk assessment. Like, where am I? And then the next question you're asking, like the traditional, what is my risk appetite? What is my risk capacity? What is my risk tolerance? And then you get the right subject matter experts together, like legal, finance, engineering, security. You get them together and say, okay, let's figure out, like, those are the risks that we have. Let's figure out what is my appetite, what is my tolerance, right? Yeah. And then based on that, we come with the kind of the guardrails. You can use AI for this. You cannot use it for that. Right. You can use it for this under those conditions. Right. And once you start doing that, you put together your policies, then I wouldn't say it's easier, but it's easier.
Yes.
Because you can kind of start marching together around the same, And I want to hear your opinion about the EU AI Act.
Right.
That is very interesting because essentially they put together a framework how to do the risk assessments around AI. And then you take that framework and then you come up with your policies, the governance, and how you implement
Yes.
that framework. But they came up with the framework. What do you think about that framework?
Well, I think a quick little digression here. I teach a class at a law school. I teach AI governance and cybersecurity law at
Awesome.
Santa Clara University. I also teach a law class and a master's in data science program here in the Bay Area. And one of the things I have for the classes is a pyramid on the EU AI Act. You have the minimal risk, you have the and I should know this off the top of my head, but you have increasing unacceptable risk at the top.
Yeah, at the top is that person can die.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it's public profiling by the government.
Right.
It's these things you don't do this.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, no. Minimal risk like spam filters, things like that. And then you work your way up. I think the most common area of applications in that, it's second tier up from the bottom. It's not medium risk, but it's kind of like that. That's where most of the day-to-day effect is. And you have to look at the domain itself in order to inform the risk.
Mhm.
So if you're doing identity management, or if you're doing hiring and firing of people,
Yeah.
or you are determining, you're a government agency, you're determining whether or not someone should be paroled or not. And you're using AI to say, well, you know, based on this person's profile, we say you should be released on this date instead of that one. Well, if it's biased, if it's, you know, unfair,
Right.
and it's giving certain people, certain ethnicity or what have you, more time than they should, because the data is bad.
Yes.
Right.
The
So-
training data is biased.
Exactly, it's biased.
Yeah.
Because it's just looking backward, and it's looking at what was discriminatory in the past. It's
Yeah.
going to predict the same thing.
Yeah.
So let's go in there and level that out. So again, going back to that triangle, as you go up, you have the application. You have to look at the risk from the standpoint of the application itself, and you can't. There's no one size fits all.
Right.
You're in your domain.
It's very contextual.
Exactly. And then as you look down the side, the fines go up. It's to basically nothing at the bottom, and then up from there like 15 million euro, 35, whatever it is, some percentage of your whatever.
Yeah, the world
Yeah.
revenue.
So that's the thing. And then there are certain aspects of EU AI which make it like GDPR, where if you are reaching into the European Union from another jurisdiction, you are covered. Now, whether
Yeah.
they can enforce it is another thing, but it has the extraterritorial impact.
Yeah, they kind of borrow the model from the GDPR.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think
Yeah.
they made it even worse.
Oh, really?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Interesting. But do you think that kind of the way they think in terms of the pyramid, do you think that's a good framework that we can utilize within the company?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Now, I was in Brussels a year ago. Right now, it's April until a few days from now. It'll be May here, 2025. But a year ago in June, I was in Brussels at this thing. And I think that at the AIPT's AI governance certification thing.
Yep.
And there was a lot of question about whether or not the language was too loosey-goosey, or whether or not some of the, because it's new,
Yes.
it's never been tested, that there was some question about that. So I think the law is new. It hasn't completely rolled out.
Right.
It's being phased
Right.
out, phased
Yep.
in.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And so the first thing that came out was, don't do anything that's unacceptable. Right. That was the first thing,
Yeah.
obviously. And then
Yeah.
they moved from there. And then as time goes on. So that's, I think the first thing is, it's a new law and it is untested. So we're going to, like GDPR, you have to kick the tires, you know, and smooth out over time.
Kind of settled. Like GDPR was, I remember GDPR was initially introduced. It was a nightmare.
Right.
We didn't have a framework,
No.
control framework to apply
Right.
this, and everybody was trying to figure it out.
Yes.
But now it's kind of more or less settled.
Yes.
We know what to do. There's some areas that we like, some areas that we don't like every law, but it's more or less settled.
Yeah. But to your question, I do think it's a good idea. I think
Uh-huh.
I think it's roughly, it's good.
Yeah.
And I think
Conceptually.
yes, it's conceptually, and is a good starting point. You got to start somewhere. It is onerous. Here in the States, we aren't as, you know, where privacy is a fundamental right in the EU.
Yeah.
Here, it's just like whatever.
Yeah. We're taking, I don't know what is going to happen with privacy, and I don't know what is going to happen with the AI, but I hope that we have some kind of a common framework that we can rally around
Right.
in terms of how we do AI governance. And there are a lot of talks about the regulations, like too much regulation, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm all for smart regulation. We cannot completely abolish regulation.
No.
We cannot have too much regulation.
Right.
We have to have just the smart amount of regulation.
Exactly. And I think the regulations are really taking a risk-based approach.
I hope they do.
I would say the UA Act is very much focused on the risk. That triangle is risk-based.
Yeah, yeah. So in fact, there are multiple risks because yes, there is a risk of using AI, but there is a risk of not using AI.
Exactly.
So they have to balance
that's a
those
great
two.
point. That is, I think, it's a very underrepresented point.
Yeah.
Right? There's risk with if it's a best practice to use AI to find a threat or to whatever, then you should be using that.
Exactly.
There's horses and then there's cars.
Yeah.
If you're a police department, don't use horses, use cars.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, this is actually very applicable to security because the most secure organization is if you shut the doors and shut down the organization.
Right. Then you don't have an
security.
organization anymore.
Right. So we have to balance those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this thing.
Yes. And you're a great interviewee.
Thank you.
Interviewer, excuse me.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. I hope to see you again. Thank you so much,
you
Paul.
will.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.